I think dry times are an essential part of the Christian journey, and they are normal in the sense that all Christians, if they travel long enough with Christ, will experience dry times in different degrees and to different depths and for different times. But I think what the older Christians back through the centuries have shown us is that we can't continue to grow if we don't experience those dry times. And actually it's in some of those really intense dry times that people like St John of the Cross or St Teresa of Avila have actually told us through their own personal experience that they've grown closest to God. And actually they learnt to love the dry time or the wilderness time or the darkness time, or however you want to phrase it. Actually that was where they were closest to God, and to hang with the fact that it hurt because their love for God was intensified. So yeah, I think dryness is absolutely essential. We shouldn't be surprised by it, and yet now sort of happy, this makes me feel good kind of culture which has been wrapped into our churches, we're surprised when we hit dry times, and we also try to run away from them rather than possibly run into them. I think there's lots of reactions within people of all ages around the dry times, but obviously between young people especially, because it may be one of the first times or second times they've hit a dry space. Definitely a dry space invites us into a choice. It's like hitting an intersection up the road, and will I go left or right? Will this time draw me into a deeper relationship with God and a new flavoured relationship with God, or will I step away from, step back from engagement with God? And every dry experience invites us to make a choice, and that choice is lived out, I think, daily, because dry times don't come and go quickly. But fundamentally, a dry time is because the old ways of relating to God and having a sense of God's presence have dried up. And all that really means is God's inviting us to find God in new ways, which fundamentally means God's bigger than our limited experience to date. St John of the Cross told this wonderful story about being in a dark space or a dry space, and it's like God saying, I'm used to coming to you and speaking to you from this angle and in, let's say, English, but I'm stopping that so you realise I can speak to you from this angle in a totally different language. It's the same God, but I want you to experience a much greater bigness and depth of who I am. And so God stops one way of us experiencing His presence, so we're invited into a new way. But for many people that's kind of like a disaster. God's left us, it's all over, I feel dry and I can give it up, rather than pursue through and find God's inviting us into a deeper relationship. I see spiritual rhythms as an old way that we're rediscovering, and many of us are discovering personally for the first time. For me, I remember meeting this old Catholic monk, and he was well into his late 70s, maybe early 80s. And I said to him, how does he sustain his faith through the decades? And he said, without a rhythm of life, I could never do it. And I walked away thinking, what the heck does he mean by a rhythm of life? But for me, and experiencing other people's kind of journey as well, watching them, talking to them, without developing some regular kind of patterns of doing my day and my week and my month, it's so easy to lose sight of God. We need to actually ground it in some patterns that help me to remember and to connect with God. I think the ancient rhythms show us the importance of rhythms and give us some hints of what we might include, but we each individually have to create our own rhythms and our own patterns that fit our lifestyle and our stage of the journey with God. And what I do this year may be different to what I do next year. But the inherent pattern, the inherent rhythms are important. I think the rhythms of life that we build up help to anchor us in a daily openness to God, work and speaking to us into our lives. And the most important thing is to being open, to actively giving that space to say, I love you, God, and I want to follow you. And I'm giving this space, this time in my day or my week to express that. But I also think the patterns or the rhythms don't change us overnight, but imperceptibly they become perceptible. Imperceptibly they become part of who we are. And so the rhythms that we learn, eventually, because they become part of us, they become habits, they begin to shape us. And so what was something we took on and learnt becomes something which actually shapes our lives. And that's the journey we want to go on.